Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker, and thank you for watching A Healthcare Z. Today's topic is the book, America's Bitter Pill, or, as I like to call it, a contemporary history of healthcare in America. Believe it or not, that book has been written. Another name for this book could be How the Sausage of Obamacare Was Made. Now, this book has been out for a while, but I just listened to it, and it is amazing. I'm going to put it on the list of books. If you work in healthcare finance, you have to read this book. It has to be part of your collective understanding. It is written by this gentleman by the name of Steven Brill, who's actually an attorney. He's a journalist. He's an entrepreneur. He actually founded Court TV. If you remember back in the 90s, Court TV is actually a pretty popular cable channel that he started. So hugely accomplished. He kind of runs with the, all the big players in Washington and New York. He's got access to the people. And so he actually interviewed the people in the Obama administration and the Senate and the House. He interviewed all presidents of the Cleveland Clinic and Columbia Presbyterian, New York Presbyterian Hospital, Geisinger, UPMC. I mean, he got access to all. He interviewed the CEO of United Healthcare. I mean, he got access to all these people. Okay, this is a 571-page book. I mean, it's a 17-hour listen. It is a doozy to get through. But I will add, it is exquisitely written. It is actually written with simple declarative English, and the concepts are incredibly complex to understand. But I honestly I don't think anybody could do a better job, frankly, than what I've read by Steven Brill. I couldn't even come close to what he does in terms of the direct, clear sentences that he uses to describe healthcare. It's really fantastic. Okay, like I said, this is about the precursor to Obamacare, how Obamacare was made, the botched website and implementation of Obamacare, and the ongoing implications post-Obamacare. I mean, literally, it covers it month by month in detail, and you can follow along timeline. I mean, this thing is amazing. So, in terms of here's the stuff that I had no clue about, or I was totally wrong about. I was listening to the book, I was scratching my head, I'm like, I can't believe how wrong I was, and how much this book and Steven Brill straightened me out. Okay, number one thing that I had wrong that I learned about. Okay, in the lead up to Obamacare, I was shocked at the degree of power that corporations have in Washington, D.C. with Democrats. Typically think of Republicans being beholden to corporate interests in America. But both the Obama administration and the senators and congressmen have been totally gotten to by the lobbyists from corporate America. And maybe that's just me being naive. I had no idea. I kind of figured they already got to the Republicans. They totally got to the Democrats too. Let me give you an example. During the whole negotiation process for Obamacare, Medtronic, which is based in Minnesota, was hugely influential with Al Franken. And Al Franken, the liberal Democratic senator from Minnesota, he didn't want to have the tax on medical devices, specifically because Medtronic is a huge med device company that's based in Minnesota. Likewise, the liberal congressmen and senators from Indiana and Massachusetts also didn't want to have the medical device tax to raise money because of the medical device and research companies that are in. So Zimmer Biomed is a huge medical device company in Warsaw, Indiana, and they've got a ton in Cambridge and Massachusetts as well. So here, you would think it would be coming from the Republican side. It comes from the Democrat side too. So just know that the lobbyists and corporations were absolutely, to a certain extent, pulling the strings of politicians on both sides of the aisle when it came to how Obamacare was crafted. And I didn't have any clue to the extent that happened. Again, probably just naive on my part. Next up, the people who you read in the newspaper and watched on the TV news, who you thought were in power when it came to health reform, were actually not. And I tried to pay attention to it. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to it as well as I should have. But this, according to Steven Brill, the power players in Obamacare were Nancy Ann DeParle, who worked in Obama's cabinet, Jean Lambrew, who also worked in Obama's cabinet, and Liz Fowler, who worked for Senator Max Baucus. You remember Baucus was the guy who sort of spearheaded health reform in the Senate. He had his Senate bill, and then the House had their bill, and reconciled it, ended up getting passed, signed by Obama. That's how Obamacare came to be. Okay, wait, who was like almost very peripherally, occasionally mentioned, like doesn't really have much say in Obamacare? Kathleen Sebelius, the head of the Department of Health and Human Services. Like, this was really not driven by the Department of Health and Human Services, like, at all. You would think, I mean, the Department of Health, the first H in HHS is health. Like, they weren't the ones running the show. Okay, and then you saw, okay, so anyway, shocking. What are the implications of that? If we see people in the news now, just know, whatever that is, it could be foreign policy, could be domestic policy, who knows, that the people who are actually running the show and making the decisions and the deals might not be the people that we're hearing about on TV or on the internet. Like, it might be, like in this case with Obamacare, it was totally different people. These people are fascinating. Nancy DeParle, Jean Lambrou, and Liz Fowler are fascinating people. And oh, by the way, Liz Fowler runs the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation Center now, so she's still involved. Okay, next up. Not only were there divisions between Republicans and Democrats, not only were there divisions between the House and the Senate, there were divisions within the own Obama administration that President Obama himself was trying to reconcile. I kind of always thought, foolishly, again, as naive in myself, that if you're the president, that you kind of have all your ducks in a row as far as your executive branch, and you're kind of driving ahead with everybody supporting you. And that was not the case. He had a schism within health reform on his own team, within his own cabinet. And they were the cost team and the coverage team. And the cost team really wanted to do something to decrease healthcare costs, or at least flatten the healthcare cost growth curve. And those were people like Peter Orszag, who was the head of budgeting for Obama. There was Larry Summers, one of his key economic advisors. There was Ezekiel Emanuel, the brother of Rahm Emanuel, who was the president's chief of staff. And there was this guy, Bob Kocher, who came from McKinsey, and now he's on Venrock, and he's involved in a whole bunch of venture capital-backed healthcare companies. And they're like, we got to use the law to decrease healthcare costs. And then there was the coverage team, which was really Nancy DeParle and Jean Lambrou, and to a certain extent Liz Fowler. And they're just like, look, we need to expand coverage for people. Obamacare and health reform is not about controlling costs. It's about giving more people access to the existing high-cost fee-for-service system that we already have. We'll deal with cost later. Right now, it's about coverage. And, as I wrote here on the board, the coverage team won and the cost team lost. And then Peter Orszag left the Obama administration, and Larry Summers left the Obama administration, and Ezekiel Emanuel left the Obama administration, and Bob Kocher left the Obama administration. They all lost, and they all left. So, I always thought that the continued increased healthcare costs after Obamacare was really just a failure of the legislation, or a failure to implement the legislation, or the point that we had all these great ideas in Obamacare that actually ended up just not playing out. And the answer is, that's not what happened at all. Like, when they put those things in Obamacare to try to quote-unquote control costs, like, according to Steve Brill, like, they knew that would not control costs. Like, the coverage team, they had to make a whole bunch of deals in order to expand coverage. They had to make deals with pharma. They had to make deals with medical device. They had to make deals with the health insurance industry. They had to make a gazillion side deals, okay? And pretty much every single one of those side deals involved not controlling costs. So Obamacare didn't control costs by design. And, like, the politicians knew that in advance, okay? So, again, maybe I was naive that I thought Obamacare, but this whole, like, and this just adds fuel to the fire of how, like, ACOs are a total red herring. Like, ACOs were never intended to control costs. It was intended to sound good. It was intended to look like it was controlling costs. But, like, the coverage team had to make a whole bunch of deals, again, with health insurance and pharma and medical device, that, like, it was never really designed to ever really lower costs. All right, you get the point. Next up, the Department of Health and Human Services and CMS, they do not like each other or trust each other. What? Again, according to Steven Brill, who talked to gobs of people at CMS and gobs of people at the Department of Health and Human Services, because CMS, remember, was in charge of the website. Health and Human Services wasn't even in charge of the website. They didn't even have any clue what was going on. They had no clue. okay? Because CMS held their cards tight to their chest. They weren't telling anybody what they were doing. You mean to tell me that CMS, which is a department within the Department of Health and Human Services, like CMS is the child, HHS is the parent, you mean the child doesn't cooperate or trust the parent? I had no idea. That has huge implications for federal government level reform going forward. We need to know, look, if there's anything that's passed by Congress or the president, and that you have parts of the executive branch, HHS and CMS, that don't work together. So if there's going to be any quote-unquote reform within healthcare, according to Steven Brill, like, it ain't going to happen when you've got turf wars between Health and Human Services and CMS. I mean, so one of my conclusions is, and the overall theme of all this for Obamacare, it is a miracle that Obamacare ever passed. And all it did was extend coverage. So if anything, like, this book made me realize that a federal government solution to decrease healthcare costs is like, I mean, there's a chance, but I'm going to put it at less than 1%. Like, there is a, in my opinion, after reading Steven Brill's book, there is a less than 1% chance that the federal government will ever pass legislation that would actually lower healthcare costs. And he spells it out, because healthcare costs equal the income for 20% of America's economy. And that income provides jobs. And those jobs employ people who vote for congressmen and senators and presidents. And so Steven Brill just spells that out in this book. Look, healthcare in America is a jobs program. And if you're going to decrease healthcare costs, you are de facto going to decrease jobs, which no politician is going to do that. No politician is going to decrease jobs, because that essentially is going to get them kicked out of office. So self-interest aligns on the political side of the federal government to, like, not control healthcare costs ever. So we just need to be aware of that. Like, if we hear about controlling healthcare costs, just know that rising healthcare costs equals jobs, which equals votes, which equals politicians being happy. So I'm not holding my breath. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's probably less than 1% chance, in my opinion. Finally, Steven Brill offers a solution, right? His solution is fascinating. He says, hospitals should sell their own insurance. What? Same conclusion that we have here on A Healthcare Z. So, he also says that prescription and medical device companies also need to have price controls. That, look, if you're going to give people a monopoly through having a patent protection, then you've got to do price controls, because there's nothing to stop, $50,000 Alzheimer's drugs that don't even apparently work. I mean, there is no stopping what pharma can do unless you put price controls on it. So, listen, I'm not saying that this is ever going to happen, but I think it's very interesting that when we weed through on A Healthcare Z, fee for service, and all of the perverse incentives that creates, and all of the extraneous costs that middlemen create, middlemen being like the entire health insurance industry, that Steven Brill himself says, look, hospitals need to sell their own insurance. And he's like, look, if health insurance companies want to run their own hospitals, then they can do that too. And like, literally, I feel like United Healthcare, like, because this book came out a while ago, I feel like United Healthcare like read this book and is essentially executing Steve Brill's strategy. They're saying, like, look, we're not a hospital that sells insurance, but we're an insurance company that we're just going to buy doctors and facilities, and it's essentially going to become this. So, again, if you work in healthcare finance, you have to read this book. It is fascinating, and that's my point for today. Thank you for watching A Healthcare Z.